Texas has been under the spotlight for weeks now because of its dispute with the Biden administration over how to handle the influx of migrants at the southern border.
But new data shows that the flow of migrants crossing into the U.S. illegally has largely shifted away from Texas. According to internal federal government figures, 60% of all unlawful border crossings are now being recorded in Arizona and California. For the week ending February 4th, Border Patrol averaged more than 1,800 daily migrant apprehensions in the Tucson sector and more than 1,200 in the San Diego sector. Meanwhile, the El Paso and Rio Grande Valley sectors respectively averaged between 500 and 800 daily apprehensions. The Del Rio sector recorded as few as 200 each day.
Let's talk about the border right now, because just one day after Senate Republicans blocked a border security bill, there's word that the White House is preparing for a plan B. Two U.S. officials tell NBC News that President Biden may take executive action to address the border crisis, including efforts to stem the flow of migrants. Now, that number hit a record high back in December, with Customs and Border Patrol reporting more than 10,000 crossings per day. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us with more. Julia, look, you are so well sourced on this topic. How much of an impact could an executive action have? And is that sort of an admission that we can't solve this problem without legislative help?
Well, that's exactly why the White House sent out the statement on our reporting, I think, Morgan, that they did last night, where they're saying, look, there's nothing that the White House can do that will get anywhere near the impact of that border bill. And they just continue to say that the bill should be passed. But as you just pointed out in your previous reporting, that has now been stripped from what just got passed through the Senate. So it's a question of could it be added in or passed in a different way. But basically, without funding, without new authorities, they're basically just trying to put a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem here. But sources that I've spoken to and my colleague Monica Alba has spoken to say they've got to do something. These numbers are expected to start going up again in March. Going into an election year, this is becoming a really big issue. Some people who didn't care a whole lot about immigration or indifferent about people coming into our country, it's now starting to be an issue they care about. And the White House wants to act, but it probably won't go as far.
You know, you describe sort of the system and the back and forth here, but I know that you mentioned there was a 50% drop in crossings between the record high that we saw in December and just as January hit. I mean, what changed? How did you see a drastic drop to that degree?
Well, one of the reasons the numbers were so high in December is because Mexico had run out of a lot of funding to interdict the migrants who were coming from Central and South America through Mexico on their way to the United States. They simply weren't able to stop nearly as many as they usually could. Then they got more funding at the start of the year when their funding calendar starts back up. So they're stepping in. The other thing is seasonal. They usually drop in January and go back up in March.
So a little bit of that we're seeing is somewhat typical there. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley with the latest and breaking news there. Julia, thanks.
Meanwhile, new data shines a light on just how much Chicago has been spending to support the migrant mission so far. Just over 13,000 asylum seekers are living in city shelters.
The city says they are preparing for a spike, though it's not clear how they'd pay for it. CBS 2's Sabrina Franza is live for us in the newsroom trying to sort it all out. Sabrina?
Joe, if it feels confusing tracking the spending, the amount of money the city has spent, the state has given, how much the federal government has contributed, that's because it is. The city has been trying to save money where it can, but right now they just can't get those numbers to add.
We're currently actually every day we're in meetings, on calls with the state and with the county.
In a migrant briefing this week,
to figure out what the long-term plan is to get through the calendar year together.
City leaders were asked once again about their plans to pay for the migrant crisis once the money runs out. New numbers show the city has spent a total of $194.5 million on migrant-related vendors since October of 2022. That doesn't include the cost of city agencies and their work on the migrant mission, like how much it's costing to educate school-aged new arrivals. Of those vendors, though, the Kansas-based company, Favored Healthcare Staffing, continues to be the highest paid, making $126 million since the mission started. The cost paid mostly by the state, the remainder split between the city and federal government. A few days ago, the city amended their contract with Favored Staffing for a second time. Now their contract is for approximately $150 million over the course of 1 year. Notable because in the city's budget, $150 million is the same number allocated for the entire fiscal year. The city is hoping the state continues to pay and the federal government will step in. Governor Pritzker has said he plans to put about 2,000 beds somewhere, though it's still not clear where that will be or when it'll happen.
I do want to get back to a story that we have been tracking very closely, as the New York Police Department has released body camera footage of the attack on 2 officers by a group of migrants in Times Square. This happened last month. The video shows a man in a yellow jacket who is believed to be Yohenry Brito wrestling with the officers as that melee does ensue. Thursday, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg announced that 7 people had been indicted in connection with the January 27th attack. I do want to send it over to our Fox 5 New York team as they filed this report with a closer look at the video.
We're getting a better look from multiple angles surrounding January 27th's violent beatdown of 2 NYPD officers.
A large group of these males, Mr. Brito included, are standing in front of the shelter, and they're blocking 42nd Street, forcing people to walk around them.
The officers instruct them to go to West 41st Street. Yohenry Brito, the only suspect currently held at Rikers, is seen on body cam footage telling the officers, "Don't touch me." And seconds later, after he grabs a stroller and begins walking, one of those officers grabs him and pins him against the wall. Brito asks in Spanish, "Why are you stopping me?"
He refused a lawful order. They attempted to place him under arrest, and the melee begins.
The incident in that instant turns physical as the men around Brito responds to his arrest, kicking and striking officers. Brito comes out of his shirt, and more of the men, prosecutors say a total of 14, jump in, kicking those officers. Thursday, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg announced a grand jury returned 6 additional indictments against the suspects involved with the assault.
I stand here today confident that we have identified the roles of every person who broke the law and participated in this heinous attack.
DA Bragg went down the line detailing each individual charged in the incident and their role in the assault. They're all accused of striking one of the officers, if not both.
The 5 who have had their charges unsealed all face felony charges. 4 face a top charge of assault in the 2nd degree. 1 faces a top charge of tampering with physical evidence. And as I said, the remaining 2 charges are unsealed.
Mayor Adams supporting DA Bragg's resistance to rush the prosecution, a source of nationwide scrutiny following the assault.
He wanted to get it right.
Democratic Party, we're watching you.
Yeah.
We are disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
We are angry.
Yeah.
We are offended.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like we're being mistreated, misused, and disrespected.
Yeah.
We will not continue to be disrespected by the Democratic Party. As I said yesterday, and I'll say today and tomorrow, if you're an independent candidate, Green Party candidate, Republican candidate, now is your time in this city.